unleashing female power.
Being a disruptor.
I'm always constantly telling the truth.
I love
art. That's all her life.
She's alive and female.
Being a woman, what it meant.
Prove him wrong.
Girls run the world.
We're rocking the place.
Welcome to the Art Pod. I'm your host, Carolina, and I'll be your guide through this Pandora's box. Strap yourselves in for a journey through the art world where we bring you candid conversations, untold stories, uncover industry secrets, and celebrate the women who are shaping its future. Because in the Art Pod, the spotlight is always on the girls. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Art Pod. My guest today is Tanya Morgan. Welcome.
Hello.
So Tanya is the Chief Operating Officer at Nicola Vassell Gallery. Prior to this role, she was the Collections Manager at Concept NV, an art advisory firm she managed with Nicola Vassell. Formerly Exhibitions Manager and Head Registrar at Deitch Projects New York and External Exhibitions Manager at Pace Gallery. Tanya has worked extensively with artists, museums, private and corporate collections with a focus on exhibition oversight, installation management, art, and event production. She's been the lead logistics director on numerous projects, special projects, including Kehinde Wiley and Puma, World Cup 2010, Steven Sprouse, Rock on Mars, 50 Years at Pace, Art in the 21st Century, Black Eye, and No Commission. Tanya spent several years in the auction world, working in private treaties and contemporary art departments at both Sotheby's and Christie's auction houses, respectively. Tanya was born in Kingston, Jamaica. She immigrated to the United States as a young child and was raised in New Jersey. She received her BA in art history and sociology from Douglas College, Rutgers University. She lives and works in New York. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. You are currently the Chief Operating Officer at Nicola Vassell Gallery. Can you tell us first a little bit more about the gallery and how you came to work there?
Sure. Well, Nicola and I have been friends and colleagues for well over 2 decades now. So that's how I've come to work there. Mm-hmm. We've been working as business partners and in some capacity in other, galleries and spaces and in our own private advisory. So in terms of the gallery, it is a gallery that focuses on painting. We have one particular artist, I would say, that is, we would consider a photography artist, Ming Smith. Mm-hmm. But, it's sort of a really expansive, our program is pretty expansive for the size of our gallery, but our focus definitely is painting and great painters, abstractionists. We definitely have some artists that are more focused on figurative, but it sort of scams the gamut. Currently, we have a show up with Alberta Whittle, who is an artist of Bayesian and Scottish descent, and she's a very unique artist, taking from those two, very different cultures, but the work really, it comes through both parts of it, and just really focusing on sort of the colonialism and just the taking back and redefining the Caribbean narrative in art. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a challenging sort of set up, because as I said, we're a small gallery, but we produce a lot of great shows for the size of our gallery. I think you wouldn't believe it was just 4 of us, but it is.
Gallery teams sometimes are very small, and it's very surprising how much stuff they can get done with 4 amazing people.
Yeah, everybody, I think we really have a very strong, solid team. It took us a moment to get there, but I think we're in the best iteration we've ever been since we opened. Mm-hmm. And, we're just really excited. Even though the time we're in currently the economic times are challenging, but, we're making it work. The key is to just stay really nimble and tight. And, I think we're one of the galleries who, staying with keeping it smaller and just doing what you need to get the best projects off is really the key.
Yeah.
Just, scaling down and taking out all the, frivolity that oftentimes can really detract from an excellent show.
100% agreed. So can you tell us a little bit about your primary responsibilities as COO and kind of what does your typical day look like?
Well, my primary responsibilities are to understand more or less what's happening in all aspects of the physical space itself, as well as ongoing projects, past, current, and upcoming. So it's it's operational in the sense that it's managing all operations, oversight of the gallery. Each team member has, aspects that that's their focus. But for what I do specifically, which is more like logistics driven in terms of working with the artists, working with clients, like a typical day is just depending on where we are in a cycle of a show, whether we're just starting it's where I'm always at one end of the spectrum in terms of a show. Either I'm wrapping up a show that just closed and doing all the post sale and post exhibition, or I'm in the midst of, working on a current show that's like, actually exhibiting in the gallery and making sure that everything is like, smoothly flowing there and there are no issues in the physical space and then simultaneously I'm also working on the show that's coming after. So oftentimes I would say once the show opens, my mind is already, on to the next thing because it just has to be, that's just, like organizationally, I have to sort of be always like at least 2 or 3 months ahead of where, of where I am. So it's intensive, but I don't think there's no other way to really do it. There's no other way.
Yeah. I mean, we all know, especially if you work for a gallery, the shows usually rotate anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. And that's a crazy schedule if you really think about it.
Yeah. Our shows are roughly like 5
Okay.
weeks. So it's a 5-week rotation. So we have like approximately, I would say 6 shows a year. And we have consistently one art fair that we commit to, which is Miami.
Art Basel,
Miami. Yes, we're looking to expand and add another possible fair next year. But this is all, contingent upon economics, projects, everything. So, but that's what we like. We're not necessarily like a heavy fair driven gallery. We definitely focus more on our exhibitions, our artists, like, development, the client management, just like, I think a lot of galleries sometimes are very, only in recent years, I would say a lot of them have become like, quote unquote, like fair galleries.
Yeah.
Where they rely heavily on fairs. But I just think like when you run into like, these challenging economic times, you have to have, like what your gallery can do and how it performs. Its portfolio has to be diversified for you to survive.
Yeah, 100%. Completely agree. So what would you say, because we're talking a lot about challenges, what's one of your biggest challenges of the role?
I would say time management.
Okay.
Just being able to make just to determine what needs to like take priority, because everything is priority at the end of the day. When you're in a role where you have multiple aspects that you have to manage, and it's very important that you don't have to immerse yourself in every single one, but you have to have a keen enough eye on it to be able to do, an assessment if called upon quickly. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So that I would say is the biggest challenge for me at times, is just being able to, figure out like, truly like what is, what is like true priority. And oftentimes it just comes down to like, well, where will we, depends on what, like, which cap I have on. If I'm have my like more, preventative, like sort of preventative care hat on, I'm thinking like, I better focus on this because it doesn't seem important now, but I know what this could potentially turn into if not taken care of and like dealt with properly now. Or if I'm in my more like, sort of like, well, what's a bottom line? where it's like what's going to produce and like, be financially beneficial to the gallery.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I have to do something that's like client related because the clients are the key. And it's like, that's very true, but it's so many things that make up a gallery.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean,
you have to kind of like learn how to balance it.
Exactly. Galleries are in a business of doing everything fast. So everything is urgent.
Everything is urgent. It's true. It's true.
On the flip side, what would you say is your favorite aspect of your job?
It's a good thing that I have to pause because that means I have more than one, which is good because I actually like what I do. I would say it's a combination of like taking on an artist's vision and seeing it through.
Okay.
I think I'm very excited when I see the end product. I do enjoy that aspect quite a bit, like knowing like what it started off as like, a relatively either formed, but just couldn't understand how I was going to be able to get it to like, from point A to point B, much less to point E and being finished. And then like sort of problem solving and figuring out along the way. So I like when good plans come together. I love problem solving. And I love to see when something that I'm like, I just don't even know myself how this is going to happen. And then it just starts like forming.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Look at you just making dreams happen. As COO, how do you balance the operational demands of a contemporary art gallery?
You start with the ethos of like, always do what's right for the gallery. That's it. I mean, that sounds very simple, but that's honestly, working in something that's more started from the ground up with Nicola. This is the first thing we've done together that's like sort of our thing. So you have a different sense of like care, responsibility, and desire to like always be on point with like what is right for the business, what's right for the gallery, what is the next step to success. So I would say that's it. Like all my decisions are filtered through that lens.
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense. Have you, or what rather, systems have you implemented to kind of streamline logistics, client relations, or artist collaborations from the operational side of things?
Well, that's kind of something that's like the next challenge is being able to like work more with, because again, having such like, a small staff, I work and I do a lot on my own on this end. But I will say I do have like a really strong, like, outside vendor and sort of like freelance. And my team, they're like very, they're so tight and they're so like reliable and good that they make like they don't even understand some things that they do. When they do it, it actually affects my job and it makes it so much easier. So being able to communicate that to them and keeping them on track and letting them know, oh no, that's great. That's what I needed. Perfect. Or if I just need to like, say like, oh, you have to communicate that like sooner to me because X, Y, Z. I feel like that's it. Communication is actually the best thing you can implement to help streamline productivity in a small business like that. It's just like your colleagues knowing what they're doing that's working and it's good for you and it's like helping you so much. And sometimes they don't even realize, but you have to tell them so they know like, oh yeah, so we're going to keep it that way then. It's like, it's been a process of like, trial and error, discovery. And I have to say again, I'll reiterate, we're at the best like, configuration we've been in since the gallery opened. So it's really positive and good now.
Well, obviously something's got to be working if you're in a good spot.
We're good. We're good. I think we're really, I feel like we really hit our stride, and of course expansion is always something to consider, but that comes with, there's so many factors that go into like when one can really expand and do it right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. How has your hybrid background of working for auction houses, advisories, and galleries informed your approach to running operations at a gallery like this?
Well, it's sort of like understanding like aspects of each of those positions and each of those companies that I work for, what I saw myself, internally, like what was working well and what wasn't working well. From something as simple as like, I recall like, how difficult it might have been to process invoices, at one particular company, because it was like so many steps between when you actually had a document that required payment to when it actually reached the right person in the accounts payable department to pay. And they were lacking so much information to pay it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or they just didn't, they would just like set something aside because they're like, well, I'm not sure what this is regarding, so we're just going to put it aside and we'll come back to that. So it's like remembering that and remembering how frustrating that was, and not wanting to repeat those bad habits and patterns of like having vendors and people that you really rely on their services wait for payment. So how do you always like give as much information as you can when submitting things for payment to the bookkeeper or accountant so that these things will be processed in a timely manner? So it's something very practical and boring like that, but it's very important to whoever's meant to get paid.
Oh, yeah.
That the process is streamlined properly. So that's something that I'm sensitive to, and like I care deeply about, because without your freelancers, your vendors, and everybody else, when you're especially with a small organization, you desperately have to keep everybody like happy and paid and like working.
Yeah,
because you're going to constantly keep reusing the same team, so you want everybody to be on like on the same page and in line and content.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's very true. I mean,
it's something people don't realize how really important it is.
Yeah,
when somebody's being like, when they're producing for you regularly and they're getting paid regularly, the flow works.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine. I mean, it's a lot harder maybe to imagine for people who have like a base salary, whose, salary drops into their account like every single month at a specific deadline. But when you're a freelancer, believe me, that money, you want that as quickly as possible.
Of course. It goes into all the expenses to make your small operation work.
Right. For emerging professionals who are eyeing leadership roles like yours, what's the most underrated skill in art operations?
Being able to effectively communicate and manage expectations.
Okay.
Expectation management, communication. I think across the board, that was one of the things that I think it's like one of my strongest skill sets, is being able to properly manage clients, artists, everyone's expectations of what can happen. Because I think when you enter into a project or whatever the case may be, whatever you're doing, if everyone is aligned and understands from the outset, like what the possible scenarios are, starting from like the best case to like not so ideal to like, and this is if it really, goes off the rail. It's not like you're setting people up for disappointment. What you're doing is you're preparing them for alternate, you know what I mean? Because there are alternate realities to everything.
Oh, yes.
Your one reality and how you want it to go is never going to be the final say.
Yep.
So I think it's your responsibility as a project manager to say, here are all the different avenues this can take. If you want the best, like which of these outcomes is ideal for you, when you tell me which one is the most ideal for you, then I can begin to work and say, well, here's what you will have to do starting from now to like, get here, barring any outside, complications. And I think people respond to that better when you're just a bit more upfront in the front.
Right.
I think people start to want to do expectation management when you're midway through a project, and then that sounds like excuses. That's not expectation management. You're making excuses now. And those are two different receptions you're going to get from a client.
Exactly. I mean, you're always hoping for scenario A, but you got to sometimes be prepared for B, C, and D.
Yeah, I think that's something I would strongly say, like, implement that, understand how to communicate that effectively to your client.
Yeah, I think that's a very underutilized skill. But let's backtrack a little bit to your studies. You hold a BA in art history and sociology from Douglas College at Rutgers University. How did your academic background prepare you for your career in the arts? Or not at all?
Well, funny enough, something that I'm sure I just forgot, because you get to a certain point in your life and you're like, can I really include everything I've ever done in life? But something I did leave off there, I'm sorry, is that I have a criminology certification.
Oh, cool.
I know, right? You're just like, how do you like?
No, but let's talk about it.
Like, as an aside,
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm bringing it up because that's kind of where the sociology comes in,
Mm-hmm.
where that was my first love and my first interest. I wanted to, and it's so hard for people to believe, but not really once you get to know me. Like, I had an interest in like working for the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to work for the FBI. I was always interested in working in sort of like an art loss registry and tracking down like stolen, like, loot, like stolen art. And I was just like a huge fan of like, Thomas Crown Affair as a child. Like, I just loved all that spy espionage shit. Like,
Yeah.
the Matahari of the art world.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it was. And I think I started really delving in and taking the art courses as a way of giving myself a break from the intensity and, quite frankly, the sadness of studying sociology and criminology. It can be very, heartbreaking and gut-wrenching to like, and I just started like, getting more involved in that. And I said, could these worlds really come together? And it's tough, because you kind of have to like, it's such a peculiar thing because I think when I just started writing more and like actually realizing like, oh, I can write effectively about art and I can like, do deep critical thinking. I just started to gravitate more to it. And I think that's kind of like how, but then I always saw like how sociology was playing, you know what I mean? Like art is a huge part of society,
100%.
like how we form, how things transition from like decade to decade, like, movement to movement. And the two, they just made sense. It wasn't so disparate as I thought it was going to be, being able to study both. And I don't know, I think my true just like desire and passion to work in the arts, just like, it just happened like naturally that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think in terms of how it helps, it, to be honest with you, it's actually quite helpful because what it starts with like what I was just saying, like expectation management, like being able to assess read situations, understanding, do you know what I mean? Like how much emotionality goes into like things when people are making decisions, whether it's like purchases, artists themselves. And it's just like understanding and being able to like really read people. And that I think I did develop a lot from like studying sociology.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I can totally see how the two can actually work to reinforce each other.
You wouldn't 100% think so, but then like sometimes I catch myself saying things and using things. I'm like, well, why do I'm like, oh yeah, that's like a whatever, thing that I learned in like one of my like research classes. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like constantly like using humans like lab animals.
Yeah, there you go. So is there like any advice that you remember a teacher telling you or studying that you still kind of hold with you till this day from school?
Yes.
Tell me.
I had a great professor who was one of the only African American professors in my art history program. And I stalked him until he worked with me on my thesis, my undergrad thesis. And one of the things that he was a tough teacher, but he was a great teacher. And he was also a wonderful writer. And one of the things that I remember is, and he was just legendary for this, like everybody he hated flowery writing.
Me too.
Well,
I'm right there with him.
To the point where he would fail someone because of it. And he's like, yes, I found the correct answer in that blue book, but it took me too many pages to get to that answer. And I remember everybody used to think he was just so harsh and just like, oh, you're so gauche and oh, tacky. Like you're just, oh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're passionate, we're creatives. Like, how can you like take this away from us? And I was just like, no, I like this. I'm more like, because he's like, first I want you to exhibit that you know the material, then I want you to, he's like, the more you can like don't regurgitate it back to me. Comprehensively, like, tell me, you know, and he says, he always was able to just read somebody's paper and just know if somebody's like BSing their way through until they kind of sort of talk themselves into the right answer.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I can open this and say, this answer is 4 sentences. So if I see 3 pages, I know you're chatting foolishness now.
Yeah.
And I remember that was like a really good little piece of like it's a tough lesson to learn when you realize he's not kidding. He will fail you.
Yeah.
For that. But it was like a great thing to learn how to get your point across concisely in the written form.
Yeah. That's a great skill to have.
And it's not something everyone can do.
Yeah.
And I don't think like people like in this industry in particular, they think the flyery and the more lavish, the better. But oftentimes, no.
No, I agree. Sometimes I read press releases that galleries put out and I'm just like, just stop, please. Like you're just writing nonsense
none of
in a
ours,
circle.
of course.
No.
Ours are beautifully written. They are.
But tell me how it was finding work post-study. Was it hard?
I know this is going to be the terrible thing. It wasn't because it's just a time that I was looking.
Right.
And that, when I left school, like the economic challenges, thankfully just weren't there.
Yeah.
Everything was exploding and happening. Do you know what I mean? The internet was like in full swing and like everything was like new, exciting and developing and everything hadn't been saturated as yet. And I mean, obviously you're seeing things through youthful, sort of naive eyes, but it goes a long way to have that naivety because like when you're naive in a way, it also, it can either make you very like, bold and bold could be good sometimes.
Yeah.
Bold can be very good. So I think that's one of the benefits of like, having like that untarnished, non-jaded, like youthful, like sense of like, just get out and go and just conquer everything.
Yeah.
Everything's a challenge. The worst they can say is no.
Yeah.
And you just move on to the next one until somebody says yes.
Yeah. That's
kind of the attitude that I took coming out of school, and also I was just telling my colleague the other day, my first job out of school was at Sotheby's and, it was, corporate and daunting and different. And, you're like a college student, like you have like, I have like a million piercings in my ears and like, braids down to my back. And I'm like, whatever,
Yeah, you're young and you're fun.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're just like, whatever, I'm going to be cool and young forever. And I mean, I'm cool, but I'm not young forever. So it was really a great time, I have to say. And sometimes I do feel bad when I think about people who have those like, who just, the economic times just doesn't align with like a great postgraduate experience.
Yeah.
It can be so like just a wet blanket on your end, like on your whole entire, your attitude, the vibe, everything just feels so, I just feel like I look at like younger people now starting and I'm like, oh.
It's hard. It's hard for them. Yeah.
Hard because like that energy and that feel, it carries you so, it carries you along more than you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
So for me, it wasn't that difficult, to be honest with you. I literally got the first job I applied for.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
And I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Because I think I just took the attitude, like, I have no idea what they're going to ask of me at this place, but I'm ready to do anything.
Yeah.
I was definitely, I think it also depends a little bit on like, just your perspective, your attitude. I went in saying like, I'm here to learn things. I'm not coming with any, sort of like predisposed ideas of what this place is supposed to be doing for me. I'm willing to learn things. And the person who encouraged me to go on that interview, just out of the Beatz, that's the attitude she told me to take. She was like, right now, you know a lot about these things because you're just leaving school. She goes, but here's the real world now. And there's a lot out there in this great big world that you're going to have to like, learn. And like, there's no better place. She had suggested, she says, then an actual auction house. She says, I know it doesn't seem like the most obvious thing. She says, but it actually is. And I encourage a lot of people to do that when they're not 100% sure, they just know they want to work in the arts. it's a great place to go because you see everything. You see how all of it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. One of my earliest jobs was actually at Christie's, so I can totally relate. But speaking of your early job experiences, one of them was as a post-war and contemporary sales admin at Christie's, and you were there for about 4 years.
Actually, I was there for 5. I'm sorry. I think
Okay.
I messed up my dates. Yeah.
4 or 5, still a long time. Can you tell me what it was like working at such a large auction house so early on?
Once again, when you don't know any better, you don't like have any fear or notion that this is like a big deal. This is a lot to take on when you're younger. You just kind of like sit down,
Mm-hmm.
get into it, and just like, go through the piles
Yeah.
that are just in front of you. You know what I mean? Until you look up and you're like, it's 2 years, then you look up and you're like, oh my gosh, it's 4 years. That's honestly how it feels in a place like that, where I think people immediately know if it's for them or it's not for them. It's a very like workhorse environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for the faint of heart. If you're not interested in actually like grinding a bit, an auction house is not going to be for you because it's very cyclical. It's very demanding, and it's being able to manage multiple, tasks at once. And even if you feel like you're like low on the totem pole or your aspect of what you do doesn't matter so much, everything works towards building that big machine.
Yeah.
More than like any other place I can ever explain. Like I realize that looking back on that now, like, do you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it's like, using, well, who's going to notice this? Who's gonna, it's like, it will be noticed.
Eventually.
It will be noticed. There's eyes on everything at all
Exactly.
times.
What were some of your major responsibilities while you were there as a sales
Well,
admin?
I worked with Amy Capolazzo there.
Mhm. Oh, great.
Yeah, it was the Amy years on the contemporary side, and Brett Gorvey was on the post-war side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked with her directly, and then I worked with Andy Masad on the day sale. So it was the unique thing of like having to work and like sort of assist the head of the department and the head of the evening sale, but also managing wholly and administrating the day sale.
Mm-hmm.
So it's challenging. It's challenging because you have to split your brain into two, like, sets of like, consciousness and responsibility, because you're talking just like driving volume and relentless paperwork and like admin management when it comes to managing the actual lots. Cause you're talking anywhere between like 150 to 260
Mm-hmm.
lots.
Yeah, that's a lot.
A lot of property.
Yeah.
Back then, those sales were massive, those day sales. And they only grew more and more sales were just added. So it was like a September sale, then a summer sale. Then it was like they were just adding more in between. But then you had to sort of put on the, I want to say more like, delicate how to work with like very high end clients who are consigning for evening sales and working with like, Amy's clients who
Mhm.
are like, very wealthy, very important, like major VIP clients. And they have, they hold like a certain amount of sort of expectation of discretion
Mhm.
and treatment. So, it's kind of like having to balance those two things. And it was great working with her. She was wonderful. She's one of the most like interesting and smart and creative people like that I ever had the benefit of working with.
No, that's
Like she always had a
amazing.
way. She
Oh, I
always
can
had
bet.
a way. She
Yeah.
always figured out a way. I love that about her.
Yeah, I can bet. So what was your favorite part of that job?
Seeing all that wonderful art.
Oh yeah.
I have to be completely honest
Mhm.
with you. That was definitely one of the biggest, benefits and perks, is just being able to like, to the point where you just start to take like for granted, like going down into the warehouse or going to the dock to, check on something. And it's like, oh, I think it's just 4 Roscoe's over there and 2 Richters over there. And you're just like, and it's people just like, what were you seeing today? And I was like, yeah, I think there was like a Degas over there too. I don't know. You'd have to ask post-mortem. Imp and Mod or whatever. And you're like, and you're just like, this is nuts. You forget, like you fall back and like some things definitely do take your breath away. I remember specifically working I think this happened at Sotheby's, not Christie's, actually. It was that gorgeous, the candles, that Richter piece. And I just remember like seeing it in person. I was like, this is a moment. Like, not too many people in the world are going to see this piece in person. And it's oftentimes true, because you have to remember these things come from private collections and they get sold into a private collection. So this short window of time is when the public, will see it. And at Sotheby's, it was even more rare at times in the departments I was working in, because it was private treaties. So it was people that didn't even want their work to even be on the public auction block. So it was like,
that's a treat.
Like 3 sets of eyes will see this Kandinsky and then it's over.
No, you're right. And so much art is held in private hands that, the public will never get a chance to see.
I know. That's kind of like that's my biggest sort of pet peeve. I wish every, really like some of these collectors, they just have these stunning collections, and I'm just, it'll never be seen.
Yeah.
So
until maybe if they pass and then it goes up for sale, but then it can go to another private collection like you mentioned. And
I do love collectors who also turn their collections and they give the public, even if it's once or twice a year, an opportunity to come in into their like they have foundations now. I love that. I think that's a really, altruistic. Yeah. It's a service to the art world in itself.
100% agree on that one. What would you say was the most challenging aspect of your role there?
The volume, just the volume, the sheer amount that you had to stay on top of and not make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's really what it was. Just, it sounds obvious, but it truly was. There was so much that you had to keep, so many balls you have to keep in the air at all times with different consigners. And in addition to that, you were not only working, I'm based in New York at, the Rockefeller Plaza Christie's location, but that didn't leave you still had to deal with London sales. You had to deal with Paris sales. You had to deal with so if your department or the person that you're working with takes on a consignment, and a consignment traditionally has artworks that are suited for different sales, different places, because it originated in New York with the person that you're working with, you manage the movement of everything and you oversee that, because that's the client you're working for on that side. Do you know what I mean? So it was challenging. It's like being able to to do that job well, you do have to be an amazing multitasker.
And you worked for the biggest department at Christie's.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why I said don't think that any and everything that you're doing is not going to be looked over one more time by another set of eyes. And thankfully so. Yeah. Because everybody is human, but everybody caught everybody's things at times. Catalogers would catch a misspelling, that a specialist didn't see, or a number, your business manager has to double check the numbers. So everybody's eyes were constantly on it, because they knew ultimately as a whole, your department eyes are on it too. Right. So yeah, it was a lot of pressure to be sort of in a department that was generated a lot of revenue, basically.
Yeah. So what was one of the most important skills you developed while working at Christie's that you might still use today? Is it the multitasking?
Multitasking, yes, but I think what I wasn't able to do there, and it's not, okay, how do I phrase this? Looking back and wishing I would have been able to implement that more makes me want to work harder to do this now, which is time management. Yep. I think I just drove, and like I said, it's a cyclical type of place to work, auction houses. It goes in cycles. So I think that driving, you could never find time and space to say well, here are the 2 weeks I'm taking. Here's my week vacation. Here's whatever the case, whatever you want to sort of insert for your own self-care, mental health, whatever you need to do for. You never really are given that, it's never presented to you in such a clear way. Yeah. Because, yes, it's the art world, but it's also a corporation.
Yes. Especially an auction house. Yeah.
And I think that's something I strive and try for. I don't always succeed, but that's something now in my current role that I say, like, when I really feel it, like, and being, older than I was then, and just like knowing and being more in tune with myself, I know like when it's time to like say, okay, before I, go over the ledge, I feel it ramping up, got to pull back, pull back. And whatever form that takes, whether it's like figuring out a way to like work in a couple of days off something, I just have to do something to pull myself off the ledge of feeling like just completely burnt out and overwhelmed.
I'm still working on that myself.
It's very difficult, but the only reason I would say it's like, it's so strange in a way, because I'm like, when I know if I go over, I'm useless to myself and everyone else around me. So I can't let it get there. I know that like that shutdown comes. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So you have to be very mindful never to let it get there.
Yeah. That's actually great advice. But after Christie's, you went on to be the head registrar and exhibition manager at Deitch Projects for 4 years. How was it like going from an auction house to a gallery? Like, what was the initial adjustment?
Massive.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Massive, in particular because of the structure and just the nature of that particular gallery. It was, I went from something that was like very corporate, very structured, a lot of, reporting to this one, explaining like like every hour on the half hour, like where you were, what you were doing, like when is this going to be ready, to being in more of like an environment where it was like everybody kind of like operated a little bit more autonomously. And I always knew that was ideally the way I preferred to work, but I never really had a chance to, work that way. Just like my career hadn't taken me to that point yet. So, and I also wasn't sure if I was going to be able to, I remember I was very concerned about working in a smaller group setting. That was a massive concern. I remember that thinking like, how am I going to go from working in like a bigger corporate environment to like working with just like 7 or 6 other people? This is insane. Like, like I can't see the same people every day and be okay.
Yeah.
But again, life kind of like now downtown, like a 4-person gallery space. This is truly, life is unexpected. I think this is definitely a case of like, life is so unexpected, the like the twists and turns it takes. So that was like the biggest adjustment, going from something just like corporate to like smaller, working more, independently, like having to be a self-starter more, and working in an all-female. The entire staff at Deitch Projects, they were young women.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that was very cool and new, and I like that. And it was really interesting. It's where Nicola and I like first like, worked in an official capacity together. I'd kind of gotten to see her like being around just in like the art world in general, but like working together, that was the first place. And it was just very random. We were like, okay, like to the two only Jamaicans working in the art world, and we're at the same gallery. It must be fate.
Is that where you became best friends?
That's just like kind of like when we just sort of like clicked and just had like, it was easy and natural. Do you know what I mean? Just like having like a shared knowledge, things like they don't even have to be said. You know what I mean? Like, because where I come from, I know where you come from. I know exactly like, what's like, what you may be thinking right now in this moment as we're both observing something. It's like, so I will say like, that's the cheat code. Working now, even in this capacity with her, it's very nice in some ways to like share a brain with somebody.
Yeah, no, that's great. What were some of your responsibilities there?
At Deitch?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So much fun. I'm just thinking of like, that was such a great time. It was just a great time in the art world. And it was a great gallery to work for. We were doing like all these fun, interesting, exciting, fresh projects that, Jeffrey Deitch, the founder, owner, he just had this like really great creative like outlook. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
On
yeah,
like
yeah.
what the art world
Yeah.
was really supposed to be giving.
Yeah.
And he gave that piece that was missing. I think people were like taking themselves so seriously and everything. And I just like love the fact that like our gallery, we put on like great exhibitions with great artists, but we also brought, I think, a lot of fun back to the art world. And it was missing.
Yeah.
But that was a time in Soho. And I just don't think that time can be captured again.
No.
The artists were like, it was a different, you know what I mean? It was just like the whole thing was just different, but it was a great time. And I was primarily responsible for all like the registrarial aspects of the gallery. I worked with a wonderful woman who was the operations director, Megan Coleman. I always shout her out any chance I get. One of the most amazing women in art you'll ever meet. So strong, so on top of it, so organized. Just one of the best people I ever have worked with. And her and I together managed 2 primary spaces, exhibition spaces downtown. And then I believe, at some point we ventured off and we had like an LSC space. So sort of like more like disparate, larger, projects kind of happened out there. But for the most part, the focus was our Grand Street and our Worcester location. And there were constantly simultaneous rotating exhibitions happening. So it was quite a bit of work. It was a lot of oversight. And in the midst of that, there were art fairs that we participated in. And it was definitely a trial by fire, a challenge, because I'd never worked in an environment like that before. But again, knowing how to multitask, having a good grip on organizational skills, you can almost walk into any environment and kind of make it work. The challenge then becomes personnel and personality.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I will say I had the luck, the very good luck of working with like a really, strong personalities, but great women. You know what I mean? Just like a really cool group of ladies.
Yeah, that sounds really nice.
Yeah, it was. It's a special time in my life that I look back on, and it was like a turning point. Had challenges for sure, but like I would never not do that experience over again.
So you mentioned that you obviously showed really like fun art and all of that stuff. How did working directly with major contemporary artists there shape your understanding of these artist gallery dynamics?
Well, I think it was a unique setup in the sense that like there was a lot of like younger artists that we worked with. There were artists that were sort of like a few mid-career artists. And then that our gallery also worked, one particular staff member, she managed and oversaw with Jeffrey the Keith Haring estate. So it was just, and like, Jeffrey himself, he was a board member on the Basquiat committee, authentication committee. So it was these connections to that part of like, old sort of like downtown, like established artists like, the Harings, the Basquiats, just like that whole, Jeff Koons, that whole world that Jeffrey was a part of. And he brought that in, and that sort of intermingled with like younger, lesser known artists that were like, a more mid-career artist. And so it was interesting, like working with artists that were living. Yeah. That's, I think, was like the first experience that I'd had working with living artists, because prior to that, I had only had auction world experience. So that was definitely an adjustment, because everything else, it's like you're always like contacting people's estates, or you're just contacting the owner of the actual artwork. You're not speaking to the person that's like alive and art making currently. Yeah. So it's that informed a lot of what I was able to do from then on. That was like one of the biggest and most important, like, skill sets and lessons, just like something that I didn't have before that I developed working there that proved to be really important going, to the rest of my career. Yeah. Learning to work with living artists. Yeah. I know that sounds wild, but yeah, if you think about certain aspects of the art, well, there's people who never really end up. If they like start to do collections management work or something, they may never actually ever have to work with artists.
That's very true.
You're
actually.
working with numbers, pictures, ideas, and things, but you're not working with physical art and the artists.
Yeah. No, you're
It's
right.
very different.
Yeah. But speaking of your professional trajectory, you then went on to work at Pace as an external exhibitions manager, and then you went on to be the exhibitions, logistics, and collections director at Concept NV, an art advisory firm you managed with Nicola Vassell for almost a decade.
Oh my goodness.
So that's where you kind of linked up and started your own thing.
Well, yeah, I
with
kind of
her.
transitioned from like doing this sort of advisory.
Mm-hmm.
And then doing our first Black Eye, the project that was
Yep.
mentioned in the bio intro. And then that one, you know, like sort of like working in advisory capacity, working on like smaller curatorial projects, but working together in some capacity for quite a long time
Right.
before it developed into what it is now, which is an art space, a gallery.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I don't think it was ever 100% understood that that's how it was going to like end up, but I think it just started taking more and more shape that, you know, like that's kind of like where the story was going to go naturally. After a while, it just started to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we were finding ourselves as we were working on these like, you know, projects like No Commission, where we were like meeting just tons of artists and like approaching people and like sort of like doing like these like pretty intensive installations and small like fair exhibition type things and getting to know all these new artists. And then they enjoyed working with us. We enjoyed working with them. And they're just like, oh, you know, like, do you do artist representation? It's like, oh no, we run an advisory. We don't have a gallery.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, it started to become more and more apparent that there was sort of a space and a place that, you know, just wasn't being like, you know, filled.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of like a lot of what Nicola was feeling. And, you know, all credit to her, just really a lot of strength, determination, and just, you know, passion and just truly caring, you know, just one of the strongest curators you'll ever meet. And just really caring a lot about like, you know, artists, and like making a product one can be proud of.
Mm-hmm. So speaking to like the beginnings of Concept NV, because you obviously, the both of you worked together in galleries before.
A long time.
Yeah,
By the time
and
we
then
got there, yeah.
Exactly. And then Nicola started Concept NV.
Yes, she
How
did.
was the conversation between the two of you coming on board with her?
It just started really naturally. She had a project. I remember she had a project that had fallen into her lap, and it turned out to be something that was more like, oh, they kind of want to like put on an art fair,
Mm-hmm.
is what it turned out, you know, that they wanted to do. They wanted to do like an art fair. And so there were just, I think she had realized like, oh, there's just some logistical aspects that would be beneficial if she had somebody who knew like, just like, you know, the right, you know, like people to sort of contact to get some aspects of it moving. And it just happened naturally. And then we kind of just like took off from there, where thankfully, you know, other projects kept rolling in, you know, smaller. Cause I think what happens is with advisory situations, it's great if you're a strong closer and you can sell,
Mm-hmm.
but there's other things that you have to be able to do for clients as well.
Right.
And having somebody that has the like sort of registration logistical background, you know, client, you know, background, it helps. And I think that's all it really takes to make any advisory firm work. You just
Mhm.
need those two pieces. Those two elements are very important. And I stress that because I say this often to people when I'm talking to them, like that's what's missing. I've noticed more and more working on the gallery side. A lot of people who fancy themselves to be advisors, you know, aren't accounting for like the real like client work that needs to be done after the sale is made.
Yeah.
And that's a very big part of it as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's what the natural like connection between her and I came,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Yeah.
we just, you know, being good friends and just naturally working together well. It was just very easy.
Yeah, you're complementary pieces to one another.
I like to think so.
Yeah. So once you came on board, what was like a typical day for you, like at Concept NV, or like what were some of your biggest responsibilities there?
I think the biggest responsibilities there turned out to be New Commission. New Commission was a project that we took on working with the Dean Collection.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dean Collection consists of Alicia Keys and her husband, music producer Swizz Beatz. It's their fine art collection. It's actually traveling with the Brooklyn Museum now.
Oh, I saw that show. The
Giant.
Yeah, Giants. I loved it.
Yeah,
It was
a
so
lot
good.
of that show is like just a walk down memory lane because it's pieces we worked with him and acquisitions when we were working with him. And that's a primary aspect of what I was doing is collect the collections management for that, for that collection. And it was definitely challenging. There's so much that, really goes into those things in terms of like, you're now not just like, there's an aspect of it where Nicola is definitely working with him to forge relationships with like, different like galleries and artists and like, working to find interesting like, curatorial projects and like how we can present things for this No Commission project. That was a collaboration project with Bacardi. It was an art sort of like art marketing, collaboration. So she was like managing all that. And then there was like this really heavy logistical like production event and everything side of it that I was kind of coming in on to help with there. And I just remember it was like so challenging, so much traveling, but a lot of fun, a lot of great experience. It was a really fun time, but definitely a lot of work. Just a lot of because we were back at it again, just two of us, and I think that was always a challenge. It's like when you work well together, it's great, but you also have a hard time, like, visualizing like how do we incorporate like more help?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it was always a challenge, but I think that's kind of like where the gallery kind of like runs on like, all cylinders.
Yeah.
It's because we've managed to like keep the connection that we have working together and knowing like our styles, but being able to incorporate that additional like support and infrastructure and staff that's needed and being able to like sort of like develop managerial skills, which is something not everyone of us particularly ever had to develop because we didn't need it or want it because we were both such good independent workers.
Yeah.
But I think that's a challenge for sure.
Okay. And then you obviously mentioned the Dean Collection. As a collections manager for the Dean Collection, what's the most complex challenge you face in maintaining these high-value acquisitions or loans for private collectors?
Understanding, I would say one of the biggest things was just like, first and foremost, being able to be discerning as to like which projects you should and shouldn't loan your work to.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that sounds very like obvious, but it's really the first step. Understanding first and foremost, like, like, is this, like everybody thinks like everything is great. Just do it because, you want provenance for your piece.
Stop you right there.
Well, I beg to differ because sometimes the challenges that one may not just, that's kind of why you need like that other side of your brain working as well. And that's where like a person like myself would come in because you're just thinking of like all the benefits. Naturally, my job, I always say, is to be a little bit of the Debbie Downer because I do have to tell you like where you might run into some issues and like less than ideal situations that you'll look back and say, if I never elected to do this project, I would have never gotten my artwork in this situation.
Yeah. And
you never want to find yourself looking back saying, ugh, why did I do this? So it's kind of just like, sometimes it's not going to deter you from doing it. But once again, expectation management comes into play where you understand like how this can turn out. So you make your decision from there, but look at all the aspects before.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. How did you also approach to how did your approach to managing artists needs at Concept NV differ from traditional gallery or auction house roles? Well, not much in auction house roles because there were really no
Not so
artists.
many artists.
Yeah.
No. Actually, if you're talking to an artist, it won't be good.
Yeah,
in an auction
exactly.
house. I would say the difference is it was very transient.
Mhm.
If you think of it in a way, when you're working with gallery artists, they're on your roster usually. So that's a long-term relationship that you're trying to develop.
Right.
You're constantly managing in some form on a daily, weekly basis. So you're like in tune and you're constantly connected. With the type of projects we were doing there, it was like you kind of like have to like familiarize yourself with an artist. If you know the artist already, find a way to introduce yourself to them, get to know them, explain what your project is, like what you're all about, make the pitch, they're on board. And then, it's like, you're my best friend for like these however many weeks that we have to do this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what
And
it is.
it's like, bye.
Well, it's like this sped up process. You know what I mean? And I think that's the difference. It's like, how do you do that with like roughly like 25 people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
25, like I'm not exaggerating, 25 to 30 people at per project.
Yeah.
You have to like understand how their studio, if they even have a studio, operates. You're finding yourself like helping them find, space to work and so it's a lot of moving parts, organizing a lot of different personalities. But it's fun. The challenge can be really fun sometimes because you meet some great artists that are so unique and so cool. And, they don't have much in the way of, monetary help, but they're very clever with it and they figure out a way to make it work. And I like that ingenuity.
Artists are scrappy. They are very scrappy.
I love the ingenuity.
So Concept NV partnered with brands like Puma, TV shows like Empire, and collectors like Swizz Beatz, which you've mentioned. What were the unique challenges of coordinating art logistics for these hybrid projects / collaborations compared to conventional exhibitions?
Well, because we had the component of corporate branding that you had to take into consideration.
Yeah.
These were all under the umbrella of being sponsored by and for the promotion of this liquor brand, this Bacardi brand. So it was always a challenge to figure out like, well, how do you make this art project align with, it was like the whole concept of the No Commission Project is like art, for art, the whole idea was like, he was trying to sort of like, say, why does the art world have to be so exclusive? Why must, you can only get art through these sort of, you have to be in the higher echelons to be able to have access to dealers and you know what I mean? So he was just like, why can't art be just for the people? Art, by artists for the people was just like sort of the concept. And he was just like, and that's the thing. That's why it was called No Commissions. It's like, why does everybody have to get this piece, this pie has to be split 8 million different ways? Why can't an artist just be paid fairly for the work they did? And I think that comes from a place of like him being a music artist and a hip hop artist specifically in a time where, he was definitely in a position because of the success of how much success he had in his industry, but he remembers, and I think it was very real and raw to him, people who never were able to get the healthcare benefits they needed, the pay they should have received for what they actually did in terms of production or music making or whatever. And he said that unfair, that misbalance of the artist, the person who's actually making the music or the art or whatever, not getting what they need never seemed fair. So that's kind of where it kind of all stemmed from. And then it was just basically having then a brand like Bacardi, support that concept and underwrite it. And then working with them to sort of connect to communities that wouldn't otherwise, they might go out to the clubs, they might party, they might drink your alcohol, but they may not be familiar with the art. And then you have the other side where it's somebody is going to these art fairs, you're doing these things. It's and what do you see all around with the art fairs? People serving champagne only.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, no, that's a great concept. And I get that question a lot from people who, are artists or are coming up in the industry. So I'm glad that, that project came to
It
fruition.
was great. It was really great. It really like helped like launch and I think highlight like a lot of wonderful artists. Like the first time I ever worked I met Nina Chanel Abney.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah, I met Nina working on a no commission project. So real, so authentic and wonderful.
I'm so I mean, her career has taken off.
Oh, it couldn't have happened to a better person.
Amen.
Wonderful and super talented woman. So
Yeah.
she's just like always one of like one of the little interesting, quirky, fun stories I think about. Super sweet and lovely.
Yeah. We've been talking about, no commission. You touched a little bit on Black Eye. So Concept Envy's exhibitions like Black Eye and collaborations with Swizz Beatz bridged art, music, and social commentary, as we've been talking about. As a collections manager, how did you balance the logistical execution with the company's mission to tell these broader cultural stories?
It was really tough because, you kind of the rubber meets the road at a certain point because, Nicola and I, she has to develop, she has to curate a show.
Yeah.
She has to still curate an art project and still reach out to established, great artists and convince them and bring them on to this project and explain what it is, in such a way where they want to be involved. And she was excellent at that. And I always commended her for the types of artists and who she was able to like really like collate and like get yeses on. That's one of the toughest parts of group exhibitions and group projects, and just getting that initial green light that yes, I believe in this. This sounds interesting. It works for my schedule. I can do it. But then you have to contend with the corporate branding event planning side because there's a party in the middle of this too.
Yeah.
There has to be like there's a proper exhibition happening here. Art fair almost because the works are for sale. And then that's the other element. It's not just like, an exhibition in the traditional sense of was something to view and leave. It's works that were for sale.
Right.
As well. So you have to manage artist expectations of like what they can actually earn and sell. You have to be so aware and figure out like, what these different artist markets are, and then you have to understand like who's coming to the event. Like you're going to have half the people here that are like people here to party because it's a rum brand, you know what I mean? And then you have people here who are like, oh, this actually looks like a legitimate art show. Like I'm going to go see art and possibly buy something. So it's like trying to figure out like how those two worlds can live in this one space, like without insurance claims.
Yeah. It's a good way to look at it.
I mean, let's face it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. I want to ask, what was the most exciting project that you worked on while at Concept Envy?
Oh, I guess Concept Envy. Well, Black Eye. Black Eye was our first, like that Black Eye's the baby. Black Eye's what started it all. It was a wonderful, wonderful project and I loved it. And it's like really it was the first venture post Deitch and post working at Pace and everything. Nicola also worked at Pace. That I know you're like, have you two ever separated?
Have you?
I know, right? Actually, she's out in the hall. No, no. But yeah, no, there's nobody better person to be attached at the hip with. And I remember like that Black Eye concept was like, going on for so long and she'd been working so hard and formulating it. And, I was just so astonished by like, I was like, we're going to do this. I think we're going to actually be able to pull this off and do this. But I think it was like a real testament to like her, like, business acumen of being able to like get this funding. And every day we were just like, it's like, she's like, well, what do we need to do? I was like, well, we need to get this piece from Chicago. She's like, well, how much is that going to cost? I was like, that's going to be $1,500. She goes, we got to raise $1,500 tomorrow, don't we? And so it's just like, it was literally that type of like shoestring budget, like every day, like, trying to manage like one fire to another. But it was just like this wonderful community of artists and like just like the art world, like a lot of people that really wanted us to succeed and win. And I think that really propelled it. A lot of hard work, a lot of like research, dedication, like pounding the grindstone for her to like, you just pounding the pavement and like really getting people on board with this. And I think, we were just so ahead of the curve with this,
Yeah.
like, taking this like sort of this idea of like, the art world and literally looking at it through a black eye.
Yeah.
The negligence of black art is a black eye on the art world too.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a double meaning, and listen, I just thought that was just like, it was a triumph. I think it was one of the best and the most like satisfying things I've ever worked on.
Yeah. No, it's amazing.
It's great.
And it's a wonderful project.
It's definitely
too.
something we look back on with a lot of pride.
Yeah. How did you guys begin working with the Dean collection?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Kehinde Wiley played a part in this somehow. I think Swizz and Kehinde were speaking, and I think he was like planning and thinking, and he was approached by Bacardi for this idea. And then Kehinde, I think somewhere along the line, had recommended perhaps Nicola could help you. She's, he thought she'd be a great person to help you do this, like sort of like art management, curation, and like working on this art aspect of it. And that's kind of, I think, just how it might have initially really started. And then it was just a matter of like, he saw the true benefit of having art professionals managing that aspect of it, of this whole, like, these Bacardi collaborations. And I mean, it was definitely a beast, because it was so much. It was the pace of the work.
Right.
You have to do so much in such a short period of time, and like just keep going and getting it out there in so many different moving parts. So it was definitely like fast moving, challenges along the way, but I think it really, I think it had like a solid cultural impact.
Yeah, 100%. And you've worked on so many amazing projects with Concept NV.
We did. We had a lot. We had the Dreamweavers project at UTA in Los Angeles. That was another really like wonderful project where we got to work with some incredible artists, like it was crazy. I feel like that was one of my favorite projects as well. In retrospect, just so many wonderful things, and just just working together in the years that we've known each other, it's just afforded us so many opportunities of like, doing things that we would have never like, been able to do were we still working under a gallery or like another corporation, So as much as there's uncertainty in those times, I think just that, they're definitely rewards and those are rewards and benefits. You look back, do you know what I mean? Like, thankfully we're at a place now where we can look back on it and laugh at some of the madness and really appreciate
the inside stories.
Just a train wreck sometimes. Yeah. But like, we always manage to pull it back on the track is what I always say.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. It's always so nice to like do this alongside a friend and somebody who's been with you in the trenches. To have these experiences together.
True love and respect. That's really the recipe.
Yeah.
I love her. I consider her like a sister, and respect for her game and what she does and what she knows, what she brings to it and all that, like I've seen her like grow and like really come into her own, respect her massively. And without the love and respect, you can't do it.
Yeah, 100%. But from auction houses to advisories and galleries, you've kind of seen the industry shifts. What's one change you've championed and will always champion that others should adopt or get on board with?
I would say, being nimble, being, not, I think galleries that find themselves that get a little too comfortable, too set in their ways, too like structured and only like see and, like, and only can envision a roster being one way or whatever. I think that's kind of where you lose a lot of like the energy, the freshness, the creativity, you know what I mean? All the things that would probably encourage you to start to begin with.
Yeah.
You begin to lose that. So being open, just like being open to like the idea that like, the art world is shifting trends, like there's different tastemakers and you can't always, it may not be your taste, but you have to like, you have to like look around and see. You're not always going to like be into what's happening, but you can't necessarily poo-poo it either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you'll feel so out of step. And like, that's what I think is like, don't ever allow yourself to be like, consider like, oh, they're so dated and like out of step with what's really happening now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like learning that balance where you can like, appreciate what's happening, who the new tastemakers are, but still hanging on to some of those sort of like old school values that should never change. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just like good work, reasonably priced. That's always going to be in fashion.
Yes. 100. That's great. That's actually, you're completely right. Great work at a reasonable price is always going to be in fashion.
You'll never have that. Never goes out of style.
So I like to end the podcast with 2 questions that I ask each of my guests. The first one being, and I'm sure this is a yes, have you faced any challenges as a woman, and especially as a woman of color in the industry?
I would say I'm sure I have, but if you don't say it to my face, it doesn't count.
Okay.
How does it?
Okay. Fair.
Always have to remember that.
Yeah.
Everybody can hold their biases and their feelings and their ignorance and whatever they feel, they're being slighted because like I'm there, they're losing something. You know what I mean? If you're aggrieved, if you're very aggrieved, I feel like you would come and confront somebody and tell them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't approach me and you don't want to, you know what I mean? If you don't want to have like real honest civil discourse, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, you're right. You are right. So my second question to you is, what advice would you give to the incoming generations of women who want to maybe be COOs at a gallery?
Well, I think I'm always apt to be careful with giving advice to like I am careful. I mean, it's an odd thing to say, but I'm much more willing to like advise and speak freely and give my feedback to people that are like my age or within, 5-10 years of my age. But like, I'm very mindful with somebody that would be like in a situation where they're like in their like maybe early 20s or like mid 20s and they're looking for like that next career move, because what you don't want to do again is like being nimble, being willing and open to move and explore and challenge oneself. But naturally in your heart, you start to feel like where you're meant to land. Mm-hmm. And the only way you're going to get to that place is to try different things in different places. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that would be like,
that's like a universal truth you can use regardless of age.
Right. And I think that's why I don't want it to be so focused on like, when you're just leaving like, a postgraduate program or something, here's the things you must do or like I don't hold on to those like, constructs in any sort of like real way. Mm-hmm. And I'm mindful to tell somebody because everything is connected to the time of when it's, it's happening. Like I said before in the very beginning of our conversation, I had the benefit of graduating, being at a school when we were in an economic boom.
Right.
So, do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. My perspective is quite different.
Yeah.
Than somebody who would be dealing with like the challenges that like one is facing now, leaving school, or even 3-4 years ago, leaving school. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side of that, there's been so many more advancements and opportunities and different faces and just different constructs that, have happened since I left, undergraduate, any sort of graduate program, like that. They're like, oh, that's not even a concern anymore. Like, so it's like, you see what I'm saying? It's like, you have to be mindful when you give that advice because things have shifted so much.
Yeah. I'm glad that you're keeping that perspective in mind because you're right. Everything is focus on the time that you're either entering the art world or you're graduating or what point you are in your career.
Correct.
Yeah. So now it's time for us to head into the fire round of questions.
Oh my goodness. All right, let me take a sip of water.
Yeah, go for it.
prepare.
So essentially, you pick a number between 1 and 9, and then I'll read the corresponding question. And I think we have time for like 3 or 4.
Okay.
So what's your first number?
5.
5. What is the last thing you splurged on?
Fragrance.
Okay, nice. Anyone in particular?
I bought, I think it was this Guerlain
Mm-hmm.
perfume, and I just love it. And the first time I bought it, I was like at a duty free,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like reasonably priced there, but I was like, ooh, it is not reasonably priced. It's just like the regular like Bergdorf's or Saks. It was just like, I remember I was hunting online trying to find it like for a better price, and I was like, okay, no, this is just expensive. I was like, but I want it. And so it was kind of like my birthday's in December. So I was like, it's my birthday. I made it to the end of the year. I was like using everything as an excuse.
Treat yourself.
Exactly. Boxes to tick off like, why you deserve this.
Exactly. Okay, pick another number.
9.
9. What's your favorite way to unwind after a long day?
Listening to music.
Okay, nice. Anything in
Listening to
particular
music.
that you love?
I actually like to, I go back to I actually like to get something new.
Mm-hmm.
I like to actually go and like purchase like a new release
Mm-hmm.
by an artist that like, either I've loved in the past or like, just somebody I'm like trying out and then I go back into sort of like my college and high school years of how I used to listen to music. It's like a whole thing I do. But it's really helpful and therapeutic where it's like, I listen to beats, syncopations, rhythms first, and then I go back and then I listen to the actual lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I always listen to things like since I was like younger. Like I listen to like the albums that way.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of like, so it's like using that idiosyncratic OCD weirdness for like something that I enjoy actually helps me unwind.
Listen, we all have our quirks.
So
Okay, another number.
Okay, did 5 to 9? 2.
2. What is the most underrated skill in gallery management?
I think, I don't know if it's a cheat, but it's just an underrated skill in life and just operating in the world.
Tell me.
Not just saying it, but understanding it, comprehending it, and living it, and knowing that the way you think is not the way other people think.
Yep.
I would say
That's great.
that is one of the most underrated and like massively helpful things that you can ever like. Just don't say it because people say it all the time. Well, everybody's different. Not everybody's going to think the same. Everybody's their own unique snowflower. It's like no. Like you really have to actually. Because I always say there's, obviously there's a difference between empathy and sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
An empathetic person as opposed to a sympathetic person are very different things. I'm an empathetic person. And I think that having that is what makes me able to understand like, no, I can't give you advice as me. I have to give you advice as what I know you can handle because you're you. And I think that's the thing. Like if you always start off from a place of that, no, you can't assume that your way of thinking and your way of handling this is going to be everybody else's. It's like I kind of say it's a way of like collecting like styles of people's like work styles, people's like, points of view. I collect them in a way and I keep them because I'm like, you never know what you have to utilize when you have to mimic or feed something back to somebody because you have to structure it in the way that they're going to understand it.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach
Not
it.
how you know how to do it, but like how they're, because you're going to give them your advice and you're going to give them like the solution that you think fits, but you have to, everything is in presentation and the way you give it back to somebody. And I always say, I don't like to use the word problem. I'd hate the word problem. When somebody comes to me and they start off saying, oh my God, I have a problem. I need you to help me with. And it's like, no, don't think of things as problems. It's like, why are they a problem? Like who told you this was a problem? it may not even be a problem.
Yeah.
It may not even need any solution. You know what I mean? Sometimes you can leave things alone too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an underused skill as well, like an underrated skill to like, don't treat everything as something that needs to be like fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really great. Okay, one more number.
I did 2. I did 5.
and
I
you
did 9. Okay. So lucky number 7.
Lucky number 7. That's actually my favorite number too. Who is an emerging artist you think everyone should know about?
Oh, goodness. An emerging artist. Emerging?
Emerging.
Who
do you love that people might not know about?
Oh, I don't know. I think people know about them, but I'm just like, my mind goes immediately to our roster. Right, Lori?
Of course, you can pick someone from there.
Actually, no bias, but she is going to be our fall show. I love a wonderful ceramicist based in Philly named Adabume Badeba.
Okay.
Adabume, she presented with us. She's a gallery artist now. She's on our roster officially. She did her first project with us for the Independent Art Fair last year, but she's going to be having her first solo show with us in September. And her story, her technique, the background, just the anthropology of it all, it's just so gorgeous and like engaging and interesting and deep and heavy and sad and joyful and everything all in one. And I think she's a wonderful artist. And I think she's known to a lot of institutions. She did a wonderful project at the Sydney Biennial. She's had a lot of institutional recognition, but I'd love to see her like come more into like, like sort of like the more commercial, like, galleries like I sphere. So with our help, that's what this show will bring. But I love her. I love her work. And I'm happy. She's like an artist that I'm happy to see like really growing. So you're based here, so you'll come to her show.
100% because I love ceramics.
Oh, her works are beautiful.
Amazing.
The story behind it and just like her practice, her process, so fascinating. So she's a wonderful artist, and I want more people to know about her.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to be there. I can't wait. So thank you for sharing her name.
Yes.
But thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, for sharing some pearls of wisdom to the listeners. Yeah, no, they were fantastic. And yeah, just thank you for being here.
Thank you. I enjoyed this. It was outside of my comfort zone, but hey, you never. No, you got to teach like old dog new tricks, they say. Come out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, well, you did great. So there you
go.
And to all my listeners, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.